Hello, children. Would you like to hear a story? How about the Shoemaker and the Elves? Once upon a time, there lived an old shoemaker and his wife at the edge of a village. And although they were very nice people and the shoemaker worked very hard, hardly anyone came out all the way to the edge of the village to buy his shoes. It got so bad that one night their cupboard was empty of food, and the poor old shoemaker only had enough leather left to make one pair of shoes. That night he cut out the leather on his workbench, and he and his wife went to bed, and he planned to make the shoes in the morning. The next morning, when he woke up and went to his workbench, there were the shoes, all sewn and finished. And not only were they sewn, they were so beautifully sewn and so perfectly finished, he had never seen shoes as fine as these. He put them in his shop window, and eventually some people came by and saw them and went back to the village and told all their friends about the wonderful shoes that the shoemaker at the edge of the village had in his window. Soon a very rich merchant heard about the shoes and came to see them. He loved them instantly and paid the shoemaker a lot of money for them. The shoemaker and his wife were so happy. They went into the village and bought a lot of food for supper and enough leather to make 2 more pairs of shoes. That night, the shoemaker cut out the leather to sew the shoes the next day, and they went to bed. But when he woke up in the morning and went to his workbench, he saw that the 2 pairs of shoes were all done. And they were beautiful, beautiful shoes. He put them right in his window, and soon some people walked by and went back to the village and told everyone about the wonderful pairs of shoes the shoemaker had in his window. Some rich people from the village came out to the edge of the village and saw his shoes and paid him very handsomely for it. The shoemaker and his wife were so happy. They bought enough food to fill their pantry, and the shoemaker bought enough leather to make 3 pairs of shoes. This went on night after night. Every night the shoemaker would cut out some leather, and when he'd wake up in the morning, the leather had been all sewn into beautiful shoes and boots. Soon the shoemaker was well known for making beautiful shoes, and he and his wife had a full cupboard and a warm home to live in. One night, the wife said to the shoemaker, "Husband, aren't you curious to know who's been making our shoes? Tonight, let's hide behind the door and see who's doing this for us." So that night, the shoemaker and the wife, instead of going to bed, hid behind the bedroom door and watched the workbench. At midnight, they were surprised to see 2 little elves come in through the window and sit down at the workbench and start hammering and cutting and sewing new shoes with the most perfect tiny stitches, and they seemed so sweet and so happy, but they had no clothes. When they were done making 6 pairs of beautiful boots, they scampered out the window again. The shoemaker and his wife were astounded. They talked about these 2 little elves and how much good luck they had brought to them. And the wife said, "But husband, I'm so concerned that they have no clothes and shoes of their own. It's so cold this winter." So all that day, the shoemaker and his wife sewed them clothes. They made 2 little pairs of woolen pants and 2 little pairs of soft cotton shirts and 2 little warm woolen vests and 2 pairs of tiny little leather boots. That night, instead of putting out leather on the workbench, the shoemaker and his wife put out the clothes and shoes, and hid again behind the door to see what would happen. At midnight, the two little elves came in through the window and went to the workbench. When they didn't see any leather for them to work on, they were confused. But when they saw the little clothes, they were so happy. They put on their little pants and shirts and vests and their little shoes, and they danced and hugged and laughed, and they scampered out the window and never came back again. But by now, the shoemaker was so well known for the high quality of the work that he himself could do, that they sold many shoes, and he and his wife were never hungry again, and they lived in their little house on the edge of the village happily until the end of their days. The end. I love you.